Hey YouTube, what's chill? It's your old pal Fluffship back here with another video, and today I will be predicting the result of the upcoming, well, not really upcoming at this point because it's today, 2024 U.S. presidential election between Kamala Davy Harris of the Democratic Party and Donald John Trump of the Republican Party. This is an election I've been very nervous about, obviously, as I think a lot of Americans have. It's the first one I have legally been able to vote in, and I was able to, thanks to my state's very convenient digital ballot submission portal. You can even sign your affidavit digitally these days, and it turns out my digital signature is actually neater than my than my handwritten signature, like with pen or pencil anyway, which is kind of odd. But I'm just graphic, so I guess not really. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is, this is an election I've been very worried about. I, like many Americans, feel that democracy may very well be hanging in the balance here. And of course, election day is always exciting for me because I love watching the results roll in, the maps change because I'm a big maps guy, so that's exciting for me in many ways. But yeah, nonetheless, I should probably trying to remember. Oh yes, and the other element of this for me that only I believe has served to exacerbate my anxiety, or will anyway if it hasn't already, is the fact that I am currently in Taiwan studying abroad, as I have been for several months now, and I guess several is an overstatement. A few months, anyways. That's not important. But and the knowledge of geographic distance in conjunction with um, in conjunction with the fact of I'll have to wake up a bit earlier to watch election return results, so I is may intensify my already stratospheric anxiety. Simply for the reason that sometimes helps to have an election day routine a little to settle one's nerves, and this year that will all obviously be subverted. Anyway, enough bullcrap. Let's get right into the prediction. Shout out to Fox 10 Phoenix, Arizona for this 270 to win imported map that, well, unfortunately, the 270 to win website itself had a lot of irritating ads, and I didn't feel like dealing with those in a video where it's pretty necessary to screen record. So anyway, let's jump right into the prediction. I think the first thing we can do here is establish safe or lock states. Starting out here with Vermont, goes deep blue every time. It's been one of the highest Harris margins of lead in the polls. Not that that means too much, as I'll say many times throughout this video, but I think that should be pretty safe for Harris. Oh, and the other nice thing about this particular mapping program that Fox 10 Phoenix has is it fills the state in exactly as projected, so lock states will be easy to fill and no clicking around the color wheel, if you will. New Hampshire does sometimes, but probably leans the farthest right of any New England state, but I think it should still be safe for Harris. Massachusetts, one of the deepest blue states in the country, shouldn't be in question. Rhode Island, Connecticut, similarly very safe for Harris, one would certainly think. New Jersey does have some more right-leaning counties, especially on the coast, but that should not be enough to overcome the dense Democratic vote in the Newark area and around the New York metro farther north in the state. Delaware also should go blue. Maryland and Washington, D.C. should as well. Maine, I believe if I click it, it'll fill in exactly how I predict its split electoral vote to play out. Yes, indeed. Statewide for Harris, District 1, also for Harris, which, adaptive charging is on. Okay, I didn't need to know that right now. Anyways, statewide for Harris, District 1, I believe, wait, let me check that. Yes, District 1 for Harris, which sort of hugs a large part of the southern coast and also has Maine's largest city, Portland, so that makes sense. And District 2, farther north, much more rural, should go for Trump. New York, oh, shoot, wait, is my cursor even more? Okay, there we go. We got it back. New York should also be very safe for Harris. Virginia, at certain points, especially briefly before Biden dropped out, I think many pundits thought it may become competitive, but it should still go pretty safely for Harris. The vote in Nova around the D.C. metro should carry that. West Virginia should be very safe for Trump, as it almost always is for Republicans. Kentucky as well. Ohio had been a battleground state for many years, but Republicans have made significant inroads into Democratic leads in Cuyahoga County, in around the Cleveland area, and those suburbs, and have just intensified their lead in rural areas. So Ohio should not be competitive this year. That should break for Trump pretty easily. Indiana has been very Republican leaning for many cycles, should not change here. Illinois, owing to Chicago, third largest city in the nation, Cook County, and all that, should go blue very safely. Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, South Carolina should all go for Trump very easily, and Florida should as well. Florida, once again, another state that used to be considered somewhat of a battleground, really not so much anymore. Especially well, I don't need to get into the granular details so much there. I won't get hung up on that. We know how that state will go. Texas, the second largest prize on the electoral map, should go red as well. Has been trending bluer in recent years, but not enough to convince me that it will flip here. Oklahoma, in fact, it's possibly closer to flipping in the Senate race than the presidential, and even that I don't think is terribly likely. Oklahoma, Kansas should also go for Trump as well. Iowa, I did see one poll that briefly said that Harris was in the lead, which was very odd to me. That sure, there's Des Moines, major city, Iowa City, big college town, but but there are only about 6 or so counties in Iowa that vote blue with any regularity. I don't really see any reason why Trump shouldn't easily carry the state. Minnesota, somewhat similarly to Virginia, some pundits did think would be competitive briefly before Biden left the race, and when his approval ratings were basically in the core of the earth, they were so low, and that would have been a major concern for Democrats, considering Minnesota is one of the bigger Midwestern strongholds for Democrats. It should go for Harris here. Numbers have been much healthier ever since she entered the race, therefore Democrats. Both of the Dakotas should break easily for Trump, as should the Northern Rockies, Montana, Wyoming, Idaho. Nebraska, yet another split electoral vote state. Once again, if I click it, yes, it breaks exactly the way I expect it to. I'm just going to check my district numbers here. Statewide for Trump, obviously. Districts 1 and 3 radiating out from District 2 to the west should both go safely for Trump with just almost entirely rural vote. And District 2, Omaha and some of its suburbs was gerrymandered slightly in favor of Republicans some years ago, but it should still break for Harris here, as I predict. Utah should also go safely for Trump. And then we have a couple small blue walls here. This Southern Rockies blue wall, Colorado, New Mexico, both should be safe for Harris, as they have for Democrats for several cycles. And Washington, Oregon, and the biggest prize on the map, Kamala Harris's home state of California, should also break for her. Alaska and Hawaii. Alaska sometimes is only really light red, but I don't really see any reason why it shouldn't go for Trump. And conversely, Hawaii has been carried by Democrats for more cycles than for longer than I've been alive. Let's put it that way, and that should not change here. Now, here we get into the interesting part, the battleground states. Now, I'm going to do 3 projections. The first projection will be a best-case scenario for Trump, which I, through my personal bias, would regard to be a worst-case scenario. If you'll forgive the dispensation of personal opinions, this is my channel, though, and I get to say what I want. The second scenario I will drop is will be a best-case scenario for Harris, or what I personally through my bias, would deem to be a best-case scenario overall. And the third and final will be my official prediction for this election. All right. Trump's best case scenario, right off the bat, I think he wins both battleground states out west, Arizona and New Mexico. Arizona has had the widest. I keep saying don't put too much stock in polls, and then I keep using polls to justify my arguments, which is not the greatest, but anyway, you'll forgive me for that, I hope. Arizona has had the largest Trump margin of lead in the polls. It's the least battlegroundy of battleground states, at least as projected right now. He's opened up leads there of sometimes 3, 4, I think maybe even 5 points in certain polls at certain points. And Nevada was considered very safe for Democrats before the 2020 cycle when Biden did carry it, but underperformed pretty significantly, especially compared to numbers in recent years. I say that in Trump's very best case scenario, he can flip the state. Georgia, now, Georgia, Biden was able to establish a pretty wide blue blob, so it was called, around Atlanta, of dense urban and suburban Atlanta support, and that helped him carry the state. Obviously, this time around, I've been feeling that the numbers in Georgia have not been as favorable for Harris as they were for Biden in 2020. I think there is actually a good chance Harris underperforms Biden a good deal in Georgia. And in Trump's best case scenario, I think he certainly can carry the state. North Carolina, Harris's voter mobilization efforts in North Carolina have been very impressive. She's clearly been reaching out to a lot of rural voters in North Carolina in an attempt to flip the very important electoral prize. But ultimately, I don't see this being enough, especially with plenty of Trump support in suburban areas as well, especially around Raleigh and Charlotte. I think that should still break for Trump. Now, the upper Midwest, or the old Northwest, as it used to be called, maybe back in the mid 19th century, well, really more like early 19th century for those of you history buffs. Wisconsin, I think, is the one state that I think, even in Trump's best case scenario, should definitely still break for Harris. I think her numbers there are looking better than in most other battleground states, and I do actually like her chances in the Milwaukee suburbs, which will be key to carrying the state. As to Michigan, this is interesting because, as has been very broadly publicized, the special Michigan-specific voter bloc here will be the Arab American community. Detroit having the highest Arab American population per capita, or maybe one of the highest, if not the highest, in the country. I certainly don't think that voter bloc will break for Trump, but the question is if they'll show out in big enough numbers for Harris. Certainly, I think certainly in Trump's best case scenario, Harris's lack of willingness to make a broader statement against the Israeli government in the midst of their atrocities in Gaza, I think, could ultimately lead to less turnout than she might like in the state. And in Trump's best case scenario, I think that maybe the Arab American community overall maybe doesn't show out as much, and the rural vote carries the state. Trump wins it. Pennsylvania, I think, is basically a jump ball at this state. Excuse me. At this point, this is one of the. I think this is the electoral prize that will carry the election. Even though, as you can see in this projection, Trump is already over the line. I think in his best case scenario, he is certainly able to win it, expanding on suburban support in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh suburbs, while still carrying a good amount of rural vote. All right, this is my projection for Trump's best case scenario: 302 electoral college vote victory over Kamala Harris's 236. Now, let's re-green the battleground states one by one. Give me one moment. All right, there we go. Now, for Harris's best case scenario, I think right away Harris can recover some of the support Biden lost in Nevada, even though he did still, as aforementioned, win the state. I think in her best case scenario, she can really milk Clark County and suburban Las Vegas, and obviously the urban center of the city, and Henderson as well, to ultimately carry that state. Usually, if Clark County goes blue enough, the state will follow. Arizona, I'm still not. I'm just not sold in Harris performing as well in Arizona as Biden did in 2020. As we know, Maricopa County will prove key once again. If she can extract enough support from that, maybe. I personally just don't really see it this cycle. I think Trump still wins that. Of these two southern battlegrounds, I think she can win one. And I think the likelier of the two is Georgia, on the chance that in places like Cobb County and DeKalb County, she's able to expand on that blue blob support that Biden established so strong, or as strongly as he did anyway, in 2020. North Carolina, once again, I think the suburban support for Trump, as well as the rural vote, will ultimately prove a bit too much for Harris to win. Wisconsin, once again, as aforementioned, I think is looking actually pretty good for Harris as these battlegrounds go, so I will project that for her. And Michigan, I think conversely, you could look at the flip side of the potential of the how do I put this? Uh, you could look at just the volume, as I mentioned, of support in the Arab American community will be very important for Harris to win the state, and especially support in suburban Detroit, especially in places like Oakland County. And Harris did just has been campaigning heavily in Michigan. She did just make a big speech at a campaign event, emphasizing the need for Palestinian autonomy, and that may well end up winning over a good number of voters in her best case scenario. I think a lot of Arab Americans deem her message on the war between Israel and Palestine, maybe not ideal, but different enough from Biden's that they show out in larger numbers, and that helps her carry the state. Pennsylvania, once again, I think is a jump ball. Um, the one key to Pennsylvania, I think, and everyone says it will be Lackawanna County, the Scranton area, Biden's hometown. So and the surrounding area also near Wilkes-Barre and such. Um, I think ultimately, in her best case scenario, she can probably win it. Um, Trump's this is more a minor thing, but one minor Pennsylvania voter block that could come into play is Puerto Ricans, and a comedian at the Trump campaign rally in Madison Square Garden did call the island a floating piece of garbage. So I think in Harris's case, that in conjunction with the fact that she's able to maybe extract enough suburban support from places like Bucks County around Philadelphia, also from suburban Pittsburgh, and make some inroads into rural areas and smaller cities like Scranton and Wilkes-Barre. Um, uh, I think that could be enough for her to carry the state. So this is my best case projection for Harris: a victory with 292 electoral college votes over Donald Trump with 246. And now, the moment that that maybe some people out there on the internet have been waiting for. Probably no one. People don't really know my channel. But anyways, my official 2024 election prediction, regreening all of the battleground states, should be all of them. All right, what I think will actually happen is, aforementioned, Trump should carry Arizona. I do think in Nevada, Harris is ultimately able to expand ever so slightly on Biden's numbers, or maybe significantly on Biden's numbers from 2020. I do like that to stay blue. Unfortunately, I don't think her luck will be as good in Georgia. Biden very narrowly won the state in 2020, and it was a great victory, obviously. But to get anywhere even close to those numbers, I think would require some pretty monumental turnout from suburban Atlanta, especially, which could happen. I won't rule it out. Um, uh, Places like Gwinnett County and things like that, but I don't. Yeah, I don't really see it. North Carolina, as aforementioned, I think should be safe for Trump. Wisconsin, I do think Harris should ultimately be able to claim. Michigan, in actuality, Michigan is a this is one of the toughest states to call for me anyway. I think I think ultimately Harris has floundered a little bit too much on the issue of the war in Gaza, and I don't think the support there is going to prove quite strong enough. I still think there's enough rural vote in Michigan and enough. I mean, there is also the issue of unions in places like suburban Detroit that have been, pretty severely affected by Trump's lack of attention to, or not lack of attention, but lack of care for unions. And I do think some of those areas may end up breaking farther left, but not far left enough to help Harris carry the state. I think Trump wins that. And finally, Pennsylvania. This, as I said, I believe will decide the election. And ultimately, I think Trump wins it. I think that in part I think the closeness to many Pennsylvanians, especially in the western part of the state, um, in physical geographic proximity to the first Trump assassination attempt, may affect the emotions of a lot of voters, or may have affected the emotions of a lot of voters in the way that they may have taken his gesture of fight, 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 and all of that um, uh, very well. I don't know exactly how to put this. I'm not sure. It's hard to see. I'm leaning on the emotions of voters as a potential justification, but you can't project that. Um, it's just a very hard state to call, and ultimately, in the toss-up scenario, I this is how I see it breaking. I don't know. I can't really offer many statistical explanations other than I think Trump's support in certain rural counties in Pennsylvania will still be strong enough to hold Harris at bay. But yeah, this is my final official 2024 presidential election prediction. Donald Trump retakes the White House at 296 electoral college votes over 242 for Kamala Harris. Um, Once again, to state my personal opinion, I sincerely hope America proves me wrong. I am very concerned that Trump would. Well, I think Trump has displayed very little regard for our democracy or our Constitution. He clearly doesn't understand constitutional law. He clearly doesn't understand the principles of our democratic experiment, or if he does, he doesn't care about them. And that's my biggest fear for this cycle. But yeah, hopefully America proves me wrong. But my statement of my political opinions is just my own. I am not intending to push this on any of my viewers, nor would I ever, demand that anyone agree with me. Obviously, you are entitled to whatever opinion you hold, and so please do get out there and vote today if you have not already. Go to the polls. And participating in the democratic process is really the most important thing. So please go get out there and do that. Take care. We'll see how it turns out. As always, this is your old pal Fluff Shep signing out. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Goodbye.